Good morning, sunshines. We're almost midterm. Again, the next class period, we've got our exam number 1. You should have already received your study guide. If you haven't, let me know. I'll send you one. I may even include it in today's video package. Today we're going to talk about special effects. And the thing about special effects is that they are by the very nature special. So really it just we're going to talk about sort of a bag of tricks that you can pull from, but really if you need it to thunder or lightning or rain or snow, or if you need confetti cannons or whatever, you just sort of have to figure out how to best handle those things. Now again, we've talked about DMX 512. One of the nice things is because it's a digital signal as opposed to the analog signals that were around with all the SCR dimmers and things like that. The DMX, being a digital signal, can control a lot of these type of instruments. You can have fog machines that you can turn on and off and control the amount of output. You have cannons that fire confetti. You have all kind of machines and things that can be used using the DMX 512. And so because it's easier to hit a go button and have a cue happen instantaneously because of a light cue, a lot of the programming of the special effects, even though you don't particularly have to deal with it as a lighting designer, even though it might be a set design feature or something else, you still have to worry about it in your cueing. And so knowing about it and understanding how it works is a very important thing, part of what you do. Before we get started in the specifics, here's about a 10-minute video or so about a man who works as a special effects designer on Broadway and several of the shows that he's done, and just sort of his bag of tricks, and it'll lead into, at least you'll have seen some types of special effects, and we'll talk more specifically on the other side of this little video here. Enjoy.
You ready? These should be some streamers shooting at you. Let's see what happens.
Hi, I'm Greg Mee. I'm a special effects designer. The great thing about designing special effects and providing them, building them, for me, is the vast array of technologies and problem solving, and it's a huge, wonderful puzzle to try to figure out how to create as part of a larger entity, larger production. Rain, wind, fire, fog, explosions, shooting the apple off somebody's head in Addams Family. Our specialty has always been live theater. The huge challenge in live theater is making it the same every night, and you've got to do it over and over. It's got to be reliable. It can't take, you can't spend 3 hours setting up some special rig. On the other hand, you have a lot of time to try to figure out to start with and make it right. The chandelier on Phantom is a really good example of how a special effect event is just not one thing. It's a combination of many elements and many departments. The chandelier moves, it tracks down, it doesn't really move that fast. It has theatrical lighting on it that adds some texture. Little flicker candles in it, blink on and off, like what's going on here? We have high-power xenon flash in there, which is like high-power photo flash that goes poof, 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 poof. And there's a pyrotechnic explosion in the floor where it hits that goes poof, puts up smoke and a shower of sparks. So it's all those things put together. I think I was first fascinated by special effects when probably I was 8 years old, and I went to a production of Brigadoon, and they had a scrim and a dry ice fog cover, and it transported me. It was magic. I did a lot of technical theater in college. Working in technical theater, I began doing more and more lighting design for small theater in Boston, Massachusetts. Then when we were out of work at the theater company, we'd work for the opera company, which was run by Sarah Caldwell. She loved to do huge productions, so there were a lot of battles and cannons and smoke events. That's where I really started doing special effects on a larger scale. We start the design process on a Broadway show in the best of worlds, early in the process with the director, with the set designer, with the lighting designer, and try to form a vision of where we're all going. If that vision involves fire, then we have to take a lot of things into consideration in all those departments, costume as well. What is going to be near the flame has to be fire rated in some way. Then we start dealing with theater owners. The infrastructure of the theater, for example, in New York City, you cannot have a flame or pyrotechnic effect downstage of the fire curtain. Once we find the shape of where we're going, then we can have a deeper discussion about what the technical equipment is.
Go ahead.
Inventing things is the most fun about this job. As, research and development, you know you're trying to create something. Very often the literal or filmic vision of what you're trying to create is a dead end for a theatrical production. So we have to look for other ways, sometimes, hopefully, ways that are more interesting and involve the viewer in some way. I have been working on Treasure Island for at least 15 years. The sweet thing about it is we've developed simple things that work for the moment, that tell the story, that move the story on, and a lot of effect for the dollar. They're simple to do. Untrained people can run them. For Treasure Island, we do a version of the arrow in the apple. Somebody's standing against the mast and somebody throws a knife at them, and then the knife ends up sticking out of the mast just near his shoulder. We started dealing with firearms for theatrical events. Actually, the first big one was Les Miserables, and we did all the firearms for the Broadway production and all of the national companies, and then we did Miss Saigon, which was a crash course in firearms and theater. Very interesting issues. You can't just take a gun and put it on stage for safety reasons, obviously. But in fact, the actors treat them in a way that many real firearms won't stand up to, banging them into the barricade in time to the music. Since we are licensed for full automatic weapons, but legalities and logistics of putting a full automatic weapon on a Broadway stage are prohibitive. I love to figure out how to do some wacky thing that nobody has ever done before. That's the most fun part of it to me, is figuring it out and building up the prototypes. And another part of it that is really fascinating to me and is really challenging is figuring out with the other members of the creative team how to tell the story, create the emotion to make a meaningful experience for your audience member is fascinating and hugely rewarding when it works.
All right, so you can make a career out of this. Yeah, there are people that are out there working on Broadway. I don't know how much he makes. He's got his own production company there, his own warehouse full of stuff that he's collected over time. Guns, knives, different blades, that cause blood and don't cause blood. And, again, Miss Saigon required all kind of rapid fire weapons and crazy stuff. So he works particularly in the theater, but there are also people that obviously do this sort of stuff for film and television as well. And so you can, if you're interested in this type of thing, have a career in this and create a nice little niche for yourself. First of all, when you're dealing with specials as far as lights are concerned, oftentimes area lights, we talked about the mechanless system where you have your two fronts, your two sides, and your back and your down. Area lights are more malleable. In other words, 45 is sort of suggested, but if you want to move it over to 40 or into 50, you're okay. So really, when you're dealing with specials, if you've got to have a light hung in a certain place because it has to reach underneath a batten or miss a lighting instrument or whatever reason, the specials often have to be very specifically placed, and so the special will win. Especially if, we're going to talk a little bit later about flying. Flying wins. The amount of space that you need for the fly lines, you just, for safety reasons if nothing else, you need to make sure that all those fly lines are clear of any electric. And so one of the first things you want to deal with is where the fly lines are, where the tracks are, where all the things are for the flying, and then you can start dealing with your light plot and figuring out how lights fit around the system, the rig that is the flying system, for instance. Oftentimes, if you have specials, even though it's the last layer, again, we've got 4 layers, you got your visibility, your mood or atmosphere, you have your practicals, and then you have your specials. And because the specials have to be particular, oftentimes when I'm drawing a plot, I'll have drawn a rough plot, and the ones that I will the first ones that I will draft in place are the specials because they have to go in certain positions, okay? Let's just talk, the classic lighting template is a gobo. There's a little piece of tin there. You got a little, you can have different kinds of writing. It can be stars, it could be, explosions, it could be tree gobos. Oftentimes, gobos are used for texture to make it look like, again, add to the mood, the atmosphere of the piece. Again, you can also not only have 10 gobos, you could have glass gobos. Oftentimes, the glass gobo, of course, is a little bit more brittle, but it goes in the same slot where all those shutters are on your lip soils. You have to have a lip soil in order to use a gobo. And then they also sell these things called gobo rotators, where you can put either glass or a tin or ceramic. They make ceramic ones as well. Again, ceramic ones are much more expensive. You can have a normal gobo that's in the catalog is going to cost you about $25. You can have a custom designed gobo. In other words, I could say, Cody Robertson, welcome home, and have it printed out and send it off. And again, not have it overnighted, but you can get it for about $100. In a couple weeks, they'll send you the little gobo in whatever style you have sent them. The glass gobos are going to cost you about $100 to begin with. Ceramic gobos are going to cost you about $1,000 for a ceramic gobo, and that's just for the standard gobo. The thing about it is, the ceramic gobo, you can't. It withstands all kinds of heat. You can toss it around. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily throw rocks at it. You probably could break the thing, but it's very durable. It's very hard. I mean, the consistency of it just holds up a lot longer. The little tin gobos, especially if they have a lot of delicate edges, when you take them in and out of the slot, they'll oftentimes get bent, or the heat of the instrument will warp the gobo. Again, glass doesn't warp necessarily, but it can obviously break very easily. So you can get a ceramic one, but all of them work in this thing called a gobo rotator. And typically a gobo rotator will have 2 sides to it, and they will spin in opposite directions. So you can have, for instance, the glass gobo with the water on one side of the twin spin, and the gobo of like a spiral on the other, and then have the twin spin go, and as they spin in opposite directions, it will create wave-like things. Now, the gobo that I've shown here is blue. If you make it red, the effects to make water and the effects to make fire are often the exact same. Yes, it's just a different color. When the water is glimmering off the lake side, it's blue. When the fire is burning the barn down off stage, hopefully off stage, it's red. Yes, and so a lot of times just changing the color. And again, if you have the option of just getting a clear piece of glass and then adding a filter to the front of the instrument, then you can do both things with the same gobos. Yes, and so you don't have to keep buying different colors. You can just add the color to it as you create the effect. While we're here talking about water and fire, we've got a few more things coming up on fire. But there's this stuff called Mylar that was actually invented for the space program. It's a very thin piece of plastic that if you heat it with a heat gun, it will size just like muslin will size. and it will become very taut. They use it in things like CDs. The shiny side of the CD, the mirror side of the CD is Mylar. It holds electronic information, which is one of the advantages of it, which is why it was used in cassette tapes and 8-track tapes and all this sort of stuff, and why it is used on CDs. The other thing is it is impervious to air, which is why it was created by NASA, because it is what the lunar lander was wrapped in. It's very lightweight, and it didn't allow the oxygen from the lunar lander to escape into the moon atmosphere and vice versa. And so that was what it was developed for. What we often use it for are for mirrors, because it can become very taut, and again, because it's not glass. If something falls or breaks, you don't have shattered mirror glass all over the place. And you can also cut it up into ribbons and have little ribbon curtains, and if you shake that in front of a light, it can create the illusion of water or fire in the distance. Yes? And so again, that's an example of how just having something around, you can come up with various ways of creating what it is that you're after, the look that you're after. A very simple way of doing that, and when I was in school, I'm sure you all know what an overhead projector is. We would take a bowl of soapy water, put some dye in it, red or blue, depending on whether it was water, and then we would blow a straw into it, and because of the little soap bubbles and things, project that onto the back wall, and it looked like a little stream or a little river, that sort of stuff. So again, be creative, try and figure out the solution, what you're after, what you're looking for, and see what makes that look. And again, overhead projectors are not necessarily readily available now as they were, but they're around. And you can still find things like that to work with. Cool. All right, speaking of projectors, one of the easiest ways to create any kind of special effect nowadays is to use literally a video projector. You can create, using a program, PowerPoint program, you can create different images, you can create text, you can create, add pictures and moving, you can take movies and film loops and that sort of stuff and project them onto walls, onto scenery, and it can augment or add to whatever it is. If you've got a train on stage, for instance, and you need the scenery to be passing by in the distance, it's very easy to take a video projector and have that projected onto the cyclorama behind the scenery, and it will look like you're passing in front of fields or streams or whatever it is that you're passing, mountains, who knows. So video projectors are becoming more and more prevalent. As a matter of fact, they now make huge banks, television banks. I'm going to suggest maybe in 10 years, the standard backdrop for the theater may no longer be a cyclorama, but maybe a bank of television LEDs. And that way you don't have to worry about the projector. You can just literally have the TV screen be the back wall. I know that Celine Dion, for instance, has a concert that some of you may have worked on where the floor was one of those, it was all LED lights that created the ship that she was on, the bow of the ship and all that sort of stuff. And it kept changing the video image of the floor. So you could easily do that with a back wall. Of course, the problem is now it takes money. Hey, but someday it'll be cheap enough where you don't need it. If you're using any kind of projector, whether it be a slide projector, or as we talked about the overhead projector a little while ago, there's this thing called keystoning that you have to worry about. Keystoning is unless you're coming directly on, and even then sometimes, because you're talking about such a large scale, you're talking about drops that are 20, 30 foot tall, and the edges will warp depending on the distance and the angle of the throw. That's called keystoning. And the nice thing about most of these projectors is on the back of them they have a little button that says keystoning, and you have a way of dialing in the look. You can make any side larger or smaller to square it up to the projection. If you're rear projecting, oftentimes, if you have curtains in front, they will create the square. And so the nice thing is you don't have to worry about keystoning so much because the square will be created by the window on the train, for instance. You won't have to worry about the keystoning because even though it's odd, the audience can see that. You just see what's through the window. You just have to be aware that if you're dealing with any kind of projection, that's something you have to think about. Oftentimes you can even correct that in the manufacture of the piece. You can go into the program and create a keystone in the actual program itself before the projector even gets hold of it. There's this wonderful thing called a scene machine. It is just a very strong VTL instrument, like a Fresnel, except it doesn't have a Fresnel lens. It has plano convex lens, but you can put different types of things in it, including glass that you can project through. The nice thing is there's a little thing on it that can create a loop of plastic loop. So if you need it to look like it's raining or snowing or the clouds are moving, you can just change the angle of the scene machine. And because it's just a very lightweight piece of flint film that has been, etched with the little dots for the rain or snow or clouds, you can increase or decrease the rate at which this little piece of film spins, and you can create different looks of rain, snow, atmospheric effects that are happening on the stage. It works better if you're raining or snowing on people. When you're projecting clouds, it looks all right, but clouds move pretty slowly. But the rain or the snow projected on a site, you can see that it's just little dashes. And so it doesn't work as well there. But if you're just projecting like there's a window that you're looking, the sun is shining through or the moon is shining through, that has snow coming through, and it's hitting the actors or the furniture on stage, that works really, really well. But it's called a scene machine. They're few and far between, but they're occasionally around. And it is a nice little thing to have in your inventory. All right, rear projection. Front projection is great. The problem is, I'm standing here, so if the projector is projecting at this, you'll have a nice image here, but you'll also have my shadow here. So a lot of times front projection isn't an option simply because there's not the depth of stage to get that projector over the top of the actors. And so rear projection becomes a better option. The problem with rear projection, if you take the projector and put it directly behind the cyclorama and shoot it at the cyclorama, where the lamp is in the instrument, if you're sitting at a certain seat in the audience, you're going to have a hot spot because you'll see directly through to the lamp. And so you have to worry about that hot spot and who's going to see it. Now, if you angle it from below so that the hot spot like is sitting in the light booth or something like that, you can overcome that and then just correct with the Keystone. One of the things that people often do is use a mirror. If you project into a mirror first and then have the mirror project onto the site, it often will take care of that hot spot for you because no one is looking directly into the light anymore. It's all reflected light. The problem with that is, of course, it reverses the image. So, and again, that's just a button push on the machine, but you have to be aware, and again, you can correct that also in the programming of it. If you know you're going to rear project, just flip it so that any dialogue, Cody Robertson, welcome home, spelled the right way, and doesn't, especially if you're going to rear project, that sort of thing. Yes. So again, those are just some tools to have in the toolbox. Here is just a whole bunch of pictures of different types, variety types of things that people just sort of have in inventories. One of the cool things nowadays is that they make candles that have radio controlled so that you can light a candle on stage and then literally have it dim up. It's a little LED. It'll dim up. You can, if you hold the match in front of the candle so the audience can't see the light, yes, it looks like the match is lighting the flame. Now again, don't light the flame because that would be bad. But then you take, blow the match out, and then you have this candle. And the thing about it is, when the lights fade at the end of the scene, the candle fades with it. The problem with having a real candle on stage, obviously, you've got a little live flame. Anytime you have a live flame on stage, even if I just had the fake candle but I had a real match, I would still have a person on either side of the stage with a fire ready to go, with an extinguisher ready to go. You might even have, if you ever have somebody smoke, cigar, cigarette, that sort of stuff, you should have a pot full of sand off stage ready to go. So when they leave stage, you immediately put that, extinguish that into the ashtray. And it often helps to have on stage, if you have ashtrays, you have a little drop of water in the bottom. So like that match I just talked about, you throw it in an ashtray, an ashtray. You have a little bit of water, it helps to make sure it's extinguished and not still hot so that you might spill it on a scene change and might catch something on fire, yes? There's all kind of fire pots that make flames. There's fake fire that you can, literally it looks like a little spit that's cooking a pork or a pig for dinner. That just rolls around, has a little bit of saran wrap on it or something like that to make it crinkle in the light and that sort of thing. They have these great fire pots that are just fabric, that are just, there's a fan that blows the fabric back and forth, and below you have a little blue light and a little yellow light. The blue light makes it look like the little hot part of the flame. It's an amazing effect. Nowadays they even have it where you have that same fire effect, but it's created by mist, the mist of water. And so the nice thing about that is, again, it takes distance. You can't be doing this 2 feet from the audience. You have to have 20 feet that adds to the effect. But the nice thing about both of things, neither one of them includes any fire. The problem with the one that is mist is that you're gonna have a little layer of water at the end of your evening as far as the fire. But it creates, because the fabric is a certain shape, even though the fan is blowing it, it really only has a certain look to it. Whereas the mist, because it is more foggy, looks much more like actual fire. Yes, but again, neither one of them involve any fire whatsoever. Strobe lights are often used in theater for lightning, for lightning effect, but also just because you can strobe at a certain speed and make it look like people are moving in slow motion. I will warn you that there is some evidence that strobe lights cause epileptics to go into fits. And so anytime you're using some sort of strobe effect, you want to make sure that you have an announcement at the box office. You might even have an announcement as part of the welcome to the theater. There will be strobe effects in the show if you suffer from and the thing about it is, a lot of people who are just slightly epileptic don't know it. And so they find out when they go to the theater when they have reactions to strobe lighting. There's a whole bunch of different kinds of water effects. We talked about a couple of them. Glass water effects, the mylar effects, that sort of stuff. The sparks, flames, little squibs that you can set up and just hit a button on the go button, and the electricity will spark the fire effect. Pyrotechnicians are people who are paid to do all these fire effects. If you have a lot of them, I would suggest having that person around. It is often when you have some sort of flame effect like this, good to have some sort of fallback safety system. The system I like is called a 3-key system, where you have the squib or the fire effect or the flash pot or whatever it is, and you have a key stage right, a key stage left, and a key in the booth. And what it is a little station that has a red button and a key. And you have to have the key turned. The key, when you let go, always goes back to off. The person has to have the key turned so that you prove they're there. And then when you push the red button, it means that it's okay to fire. And so the stage manager would be the person who's in the booth, is the person when they push their button is the one that makes it go boom. But if the assistant stage manager, stage right and stage left, don't have their fingers on the button at the same time, that means, and again, even if it's just that somebody is standing in your way and you can't see the flash spot, those things can cause major damage if somebody's costume just happens to be over the lip of it, if somebody's face just happens to be over the lip of it. And so if you don't have clear sight and aren't 100% sure that fire pot going off isn't going to come causing damage, you do not depress your button and you don't have the key turned. And no matter how many times that stage manager hits that go button, it ain't going to work until you all agree that it's safe. So again, having that little fallback system is an excellent thing to have. There's all kind of lights that are, I'm gonna call them disco lights. They're developed for disco and things that move and shake and spin and all kind of crazy stuff. You never know when you're gonna need it, what the effect you might get. The mirror ball is from this time period as well, but it's a very nice effect. The mirror ball has a little motor on it that you can change the speed of, so it can go faster or slower. The thing about a mirror ball, you have to think about the angle of reflection and what you're trying to hit. If you're trying to hit the back wall, the light needs to come from behind the mirror ball. If you're trying to hit the audience, the light has to come from in front of the mirror ball. Otherwise, the reflection goes the wrong way. Yes? If you want to hit both, you need them to come from both directions. Yes? And a lot of times it's nice to have one color on the backdrop and another color on the audience. I have found, just my own personal preference, is to have a light blue hit an audience because you don't want to blind the audience and it keeps them from having to go, oh, this is too bright. Whereas it's better to have a no color or a yellow on the backstage so that you can overpower any stage lights that are back there if you're spinning around. Rain is often seen in rain is the picture I've got there, but rain is a big one. Again, there's a lot of different ways of creating rain. One of the things I've been known for in my life is having to be able to rain in Night of the Iguana and various other shows. Singing in the Rain, I've made a whole career out of it for about a year and a half. I've designed about a half dozen versions of Singing in the Rain throughout the country. Because once you know how to make it rain, you know how to make it rain. The biggest thing about rain is, well, I'll tell you two things about rain, not to ruin my thunder. But you have to make sure you have a system to collect the water, because the problem with rain is not just a drop. If you have it just, for instance, if you just have it raining outside of a window, all you needed to rain is on the window. People will assume it's raining on the rest of the stage. But you don't need to rain the whole stage. You can just have a little piece of pipe with some holes in it over the window that'll just drip over the window. And then you just have a little trough like the edge of your building, that sort of stuff, that collects the water, sends it back to the pumping station, and sends it back out. If you're dealing with actors on stage, normal water at 72 degrees is freezing to an actor. 72 degrees sounds warm, but to an actor on stage, 72 degrees in water terms is very chilly. And so having a way just to heat it up to about 90 degrees is nice, because it just lets them, because especially like in Singing in the Rain where the guy's gonna get soaked. There's no way to do that with all that dancing and singing in the rain. Obviously that's what you're doing, not to get from head to toe soaked in water. And the last thing you want your actor to do 7-8 shows a week and have a singing voice, and so you want to do as much as you can to make that actor comfortable on that stage, yes? And so there's all kind of little tricks about water and how to make it work. Again, if you can get away with it being a light projection as opposed to actual water on stage. The problem with water on stage, you have to light it, same thing with snow. You have to light it from the side. If you light it from the front, the water isn't thick enough to reflect back. So you either have to light it from the back or the side in order for you to see the snow or water effect. And again, the color helps. Little alternating colors, just like it does with your skin, hitting a raindrop with one side blue and one side yellow helps it solve both problems. I will tell you a nice little cheap way of doing it is to get little threads and buy little bitty beads and just glue the beads onto the black string, and then slowly just lower, if you got, let's say you have a fly system that has, 50 foot tall. If you have 30 foot of little beads on strings and just lower it at a certain rate and hit it from the side with lights, you don't have any water on stage, and the little beads look like rain or snow, depending on how big a droplet you make. Of course, helps sound effects. People say, "Oh, look, it's the snow." Well, you believe it's snow, or "Oh, look, it's rain, it's rain." But the nice thing is, the light goes out, you fly that back out. There's no water to mop up. Everything is wonderful. Yes. Now, one of the snow effects that they use quite often is using a snow cradle. There's a picture there of a snow cradle. The thing about a snow cradle is you have to hang it on two pipes, and you have little holes in it, and it's filled with little pieces of plastic that's just been torn up. And as you raise and lower, one bar you let stay still, one bar you raise and lower just a little bit at a time, depending on how much snow you want to have, and it just shakes out a little bit of the snow. And again, if you give it a good 10 feet above where the audience is going to see it, in order for the little piece of plastic to just sort of filter out so you don't have the stream coming down, that helps. The problem with that, of course, is at the end of that scene, you're going to have a pile of little plastic pieces on the stage. And so they have this way of creating snow that uses little bitty bubbles. Now, the little bubbles, again, you want to make sure that they're not, they're high enough in the air so that they disperse before they're seen by the audience. But at the end of that scene, instead of a little piece of plastic, you're going to have little film of soap. And so having a quick mop or a quick sweep after either one of those is often nice. Yes. Of course, while we're on bubbles, there's also bubble machines that make big bubbles. So again, oftentimes those are programmed through the light board. fog, smoke, and haze. They're three different things. Fog lies low to the ground. If you're in a cloud, for instance, the little picture that I've given you, where the woman is walking through the cloud, that's fog. Fog is created using dry ice, and you can fill a stage, and depending on the size of the dry ice machine, in about 2, 3, 4 seconds, you can fill a stage. Now, a normal fog machine, the one that are shown there, would probably take about a minute to fill the stage. Now, the problem with the dry ice is it's going to seek the lowest place. So if you have an orchestra pit in front of the theater, it's going to go down into the orchestra pit, and of course the problem is if you've gotten to Peter Pan, you have musicians playing, suddenly now you have fog in front of them as they're playing their instruments. So you have to deal with that and make sure that you can add a little panel down there and make sure the fog is directed to certain places, all that sort of stuff. Smoke machines are usually chemical foggers. If you take a chemical fogger and put it through a chiller is what it's called. Basically it's a big ice chest. You can feed it in one side, feed it out the other. If you chill the smoke, it will lay low for about 10, 15 seconds, depending how cold it is. But then again, it will eventually evaporate into the atmosphere. The thing about dry ice, it will dissipate because dry ice is just nitrogen, right? Dry ice is just frozen nitrogen, and when it hits the water, it releases into a gas very quickly, and it creates that fog. A chemical fogger has been proven over time not to be carcinogenic. There were years where Actors Equity refused to allow people to use smoke on stage with chemical foggers because they were swear that it was carcinogenic, causes cancer. But there have been many studies that have been done in the past 20 years that have proven that the chemical fogger is safe to use. Again, the nice thing about a chemical fogger, if it's thick enough, you can see it, but if it's far enough off stage, it'll create a cloud and you won't see the source. So you can do both. If you want to see the source, there it is. You don't want to see the source, have it far enough off stage where it just creates this cloud that you can see through. And for a lighting designer, having that fog effect is great because then you can see the beams of light. It just adds to the drama of it, especially in rock concerts and things like that. Especially if you've got a lot of moving lights, having that fog in the air is great. Now, a hazer really just creates a little mist in the air. It's much less dense than the fog or the smoke, but it's just something in the atmosphere to catch the light rays. Again, if you're doing London at night in the fog, I would use a smoke machine. If you're doing just an ambient look of an old-timey, look that you just want to see a shaft of light, you might use the hazer. Now, it does take the hazer about 30 minutes to fill the stage, depending on the size of the stage and how much you turn up the hazer. The hazer, of the three machines, this makes the least sense, but the hazer makes the most noise too. The hazer is very loud, and it's basically just spitting out very small particles of oil that the water gloms itself to. And so that's what that is. The least amount of sound is from the fog machine. When you drop the dry ice in, it just bubbles at the source, but it's just pumping out, and if you add a fan to it in the tube, you can then take it and shoot the fog anywhere. Stars, LED stars are great. They're plentiful. You can change colors on them. You can have effects with them. You can do shooting stars. One of the coolest ways to do a shooting star is to have a little piece of a fishing line across that people really can't see, and then you just take a 9-volt battery and put a little LED in it, and if you're standing up on the grid or catwalk, when you drop it, it'll spin, and because it's going so quickly down that little line, the audience isn't aware that it's going to happen. If you're sitting there and you know it's going to happen, it looks like a battery with an LED on it. But if you're just in the audience watching the show and suddenly this light goes through, it usually happens fast enough that all you see is the amount of light go through, and it makes for a great shooting star. And you put a little pillow for it to land on so that it doesn't go bump in the night. So again, special effects depend upon what kind of effects you're after. You gotta be creative, be innovative. Sometimes you're working with your prop person, you're working with your, if you're doing Sweeney Todd, you've got to come up with a way to make them bleed and also have the chute for the chair to get rid of them. It's just, there's everybody and anybody on deck whenever you have some sort of special effect. And the more little things you have in your personal library, the more you have to pull from. Last thing we'll talk about, I'll show you a little video on flying effects for this person who uses flying quite often. Just quickly to understand how people fly. First of all, there's going to be a track in the air, like a curtain track. There are two people who usually operate, and one person for each person that flies. One is a person that's pulling them up and down, and one is a person who's taking them right to left. Yes? So you have two different sets of pulleys doing two different things. One moves you, if you think about Peter Pan, she'll fly up and she'll fly down. And if you just need to go up and down, all you need is a single point. You don't necessarily need a track. But if you pull her up and then pull along the track, you can make her fly diagonally, you can make her fly from one side of the stage to the other. Again, it's all in a line. Yes? Now, they do make curved tracks, but the curve is going to be very gentle because otherwise it'll slip, the ropes will slip off. If a person in the video, they're going to fly into the house, again, that track, instead of going stage left to stage right, just goes straight out to the house. That's easy. Yes? And so it depends on where you want to fly as to where you put your track. Again, as I said earlier, if you're dealing with flying, you got to move your lights to make so that the fly lines happen. Cool? All right, enjoy this little video. We'll come back after and give you a little bye-bye.
You don't need to be a gymnast. You just need to be comfortable with your body. You need to be fluid and move smoothly. I can find an actor who can't fly and I can teach him how to fly. Hi, I'm Paul Rubin. I'm an aerial choreographer. As an aerial choreographer, I not only create and design and choreograph the flying sequence that the actor is going to do, I meet with a vendor to decide what equipment it's going to take to achieve that. And then I meet with the producers and the directors and the choreographers to bring their vision to life. I'm brought in for shows that either fly or simulate something that is flying based, simulate swimming, or just a hanging. Anytime somebody's feet leave the ground or have to be off the ground for a period of time, they usually call me and say, look, this is what we're trying to do. How safe can we do it? I think flying is statistically safer than dancing on stage. There are more dancer accidents than there are flying accidents. So these are the fly wires. They're 3/32 of an inch. They're just a little bit thicker than pencil lead, but they're a lot stronger. Each one of these will hold roughly 1,000 pounds. This is the harness that the actors wear, and this would sit right on their hip. And this swivels, which it gives them the ability to do somersaults. Or they can lie out like Superman, or they can dive down and create all of these amazing body positions. And it's a real easy connection. This is the piece, slides right into the harness like so, and they're hooked up. I started doing magic when I was 8 years old, and I was doing professional shows by the time I was 11. I think being a magician and an illusionist helped in creating flying sequences in the sense that you're able to suspend disbelief. We all know that people really can't fly. To create that, you work with the actor in motions, in aerialography, I call it. It's choreography in the air. And when they hit a certain point, you just need to angle your body. One of the hardest parts of making somebody fly is making it look natural. But when you focus on the actor and have him or her work with the movement and make it look like they're motivating it, then it's going to look smoother. I'm working on this production of Joseph. It's an original production. It's in a dream sequence, and what he does is he flies around the stars and the sun and the moon. If your foot hits it, it still looks cool because you're just melting right back into the rock. During today's rehearsal, I was finessing with the actor how to react to all of the actions. Every time he would fly in one direction and then he would have to turn around, we were finessing how to turn, how to make every motion that he does natural. And this is where you dip down, and then you'll come up, look at the star, fly over to here, and now when you start to turn your shoulder and lean into it. There you go. As you back up, try and put your hands out like you're slowing yourself down. Because if you were going backward, it's a little bit like a mime, because you're miming what it would feel like to push off the air. So I worked with them today on cleaning that up and giving them an action and a reaction to all of the motions, so they don't look like they're just hanging there, because nobody wants to see a piece of meat with a nice Technicolor coat on. I sit in the back of the house, or I sit house left or right, and I look at all the sight lines to make sure that whoever's sitting where is seeing the same thing in a believable form. My first significant project I worked on Broadway was Peter Pan with Kathy Rigby. It was the quintessential show for a flying designer, because that's what you're known for. Everybody knows flying is in Peter Pan. And it was one of the most amazing, exhilarating feelings, because here you are on Broadway creating the sequence for the person that's known for Peter Pan. And I think in my career, that's one of the biggest highlights. Well, for Wicked, I worked directly with Wayne, the choreographer, because it was more towards the musical numbers. So I gave him the foundation, he finessed it, and then I cleaned it up from his idea. If it happens while there's no music, then I deal more with the director. Working on curtains was an amazing experience for me. I got to work with John Kander, Scott Ellis, the director, but I also got a chance to work with David Hyde Pierce. The effect that we had him do was pretty strenuous. I'm sure he probably wouldn't want to do it again, but he was very professional and very willing to do what it took to make the effect work. It's not only just the actors or the director and choreographer I have to work with. I have to work with the lighting designer. So when the person flies, we have to make sure that you don't see the wires. I also deal a lot with the set designers, because we don't want the actors either flying into scenery pieces or the wires actually getting caught. And then I also have to work with the dressers, because the dressers have to help the actors put on the harnesses. I have to work with the dance captain. So when I leave a production, the dance captain is making sure that all the artistic integrity is left with the show. So I actually pretty much go through every department. I don't go to work, I go to play. I don't have a job. Every theater I go to is just a different playground that I get to play in. And I really can't see myself doing anything else.
Excellent. So again, this guy makes a career out of going around and flying people. There you go. There's something to do in your life. Again, next class period is your midterm, or as I like to call it, exam number 1. If you have any questions about any of the terms or any of the ideas that we're going to discuss, just give me an email. But again, I hope that it's easy enough. You should be able to make an A on this, no problem. Cool. All right. It's good to see you, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.